My son rolled his eyes at dinner and said, "Dad, you're too old to understand success. Just stay quiet," while his friends raised glasses. But when the CEO introduced me as the founder, his hands trembled, his dreams shattered. If you're reading this, tell me where you're watching from, what city, what room, what kind of table you're sitting at. Because I want to picture you here with me for a moment, at this long, bright table where the smell of roasted garlic and fresh basil pretends to be warmer than the people sharing it. The music is soft, the candles wobble in the air-conditioned draft, and the young laugh easily, like the world owes them another round. My son sits 2 chairs to my right, jacket thrown on the chair back, wristwatch face catching the light every time he gestures for attention. He's telling a story about a big meeting, about how some older folks don't get the new market, and his friends nod like penguins in a line. You know the scene even if you've never lived it. The room where respect can be served cold on white porcelain. The room where blood ties are thinner than the stem of a champagne flute. He looks at me as he reaches the punchline. Not a glance. He aims. He rolls his eyes in a full theatrical circle, the kind you do when you're showing off. "Dad," he says, voice high enough to float, "you're too old to understand success. Just stay quiet." The table laughs. Not loud, but loud enough to be a wall. Glasses lift around him like small flags, and I can see the reflection of the chandelier tremble inside each drink. Someone murmurs, "Savage," and someone else grins at him, as if he just cut the ribbon on his new empire. I watch the ripple of attention travel around the table and break on my chest. It doesn't make a sound. The room smells of money and butter and perfume, and for a moment, all that is left of me is a slow breath and the steady weight of a fatherhood I thought could carry both of us. People expect that fathers like me explode. They expect a fist on the table, a chair pushed back, a voice that climbs and claws and asks, "Who do you think you are?" But the truth is, I have learned that anger is a poor architect. It builds crooked walls and leaky roofs. It makes a mess and then hands you the broom. So, I don't raise my voice. I don't even touch my glass. I just fold my hands in my lap and let the words settle like ash on a polished floor. I look at my son's face the way a stone looks at a river. Still, patient, unchanging. He sees my calm and mistakes it for weakness. Youth often does. He looks away, pleased with himself, and leans toward his friends as if he has won a prize. The prize is me, the old man who stayed quiet when told. One of his friends, a charming boy with a haircut that cost more than my first office chair, leans forward and asks my son about the acquisition. He says the word like it has a mint in the middle. My son's voice grows bigger, not in volume, but in posture. He sits taller, lets his arm rest wider, claims more air. He says, "They need fresh blood at the top, you know? People who think fast." He makes a rapid clicking sound with his tongue like a turnstile. Someone laughs again, and I notice the server arriving with a dish like a moon on a plate, all steam and shine, and setting it right in front of him. He doesn't thank her. He's too busy teaching his friends how to build a future in a room his father paid for, inside a city his father helped wire together, on roads he never noticed were laid down by hands he never met. But I don't make speeches about that. Speeches are for people who still need to prove something. Instead, I watch the tiny things, the way he winks at the woman across from him while he talks, the way the salt cellar passes over me twice without stopping, the way someone lowers their voice when they mention the CEO by name, as if the title itself shushes them. I listen to the table talk about projections and burn rates and marketing magic as if those are spells, and if you say them right, doors will open by themselves. They don't know. Doors remember the fingers that built their hinges. They don't know hinges remember the shoulders that carried crates when there were no forklifts, and the nights that tasted like copper and debt. I swallow. I let the memory wash over my tongue and fade. Not today, I tell myself. Not yet. "Come on, Dad," my son says, theatrically generous now that he has staked his territory. "You can sit back and enjoy. Leave the heavy lifting to us." He smirks at his friend on his left, and the friend's laughter is a short bark, the kind that carries across a polished room and leaves a scratch you can't buff out. "He gets nervous around big deals," my son adds, lowering his voice as if confiding some cute family quirk. "He thinks everything needs paperwork and patience. He pronounces patience like it's boring." The table nods. Someone says, "No offense, without looking at me, which is the cheapest kind of politeness. I meet his eyes then, not to challenge him, but to measure him. He is my son. He has my eyebrows and his mother's mouth. He always had her mouth, the soft curve that made apologies easy to accept, and simple jokes feel like gifts. I hold his gaze just long enough for him to wonder what I'm thinking. He doesn't ask. He's learned not to, because I didn't teach him that asking is a kind of strength. That's on me. I give him a small smile, the kind strangers read as friendly and family reads as a warning. He looks away. "Sir, your water," the server whispers, placing the glass to my right. She has kind eyes. I thank her by name because I read it on her badge when she came in earlier, and because names are how people become visible. She blinks in surprise and nods before leaving. My son notices, and I can tell he thinks it's quaint, like handwriting a letter. He mouths the word "sir" to his friend, and they both grin. I decide not to count the ways he has forgotten where he learned to be seen. The conversation split into little rivers. On my left, two men discuss a mentorship program that mostly teaches juniors how to stand in good light. Across the table, a girl with gleaming nails records a slow-motion video of the dessert tray like she's filming a comet. At the head of the table, where there is no head but everyone knows where it is, my son tells a story about improvising in the room and reading the energy, and a story about a slow old advisor who just didn't get it. I'm not mentioned by name. He doesn't need to. The people who matter at this table have already decided who I am. That is fine. I didn't come here to teach. I came to eat, to watch, to remember. Dad, he throws me another breadcrumb, maybe out of habit, maybe out of sport. We'll loop you in if we need the historical perspective. He says historical like a museum plaque. His friends smirk. One of them raises his glass and says, "To the future." They drink to it like it's a person. I sip water and let the cold moth of it land on my tongue and beat its slow wings. I keep my face smooth. I keep my voice inside. I keep my temper in the same quiet box where I stored every no I ever turned into a yes. I could say 1,000 things. I could tell them that success is not a room. It is a train station at midnight where your pen runs out halfway through a contract and you sign with the last curve of your name and pray the ink holds. Success is a warehouse where the heat dies in January and you blow on your hands to keep them from cracking as you count the last cartons. Success is a doctor's waiting room where the second hand clicks loud enough to be a drum, and you look at your wife and she looks at you, and neither of you says the word you're both carrying because you both know that whatever the word is, you will have to survive it together. But this is not a room that understands that language yet. They understand likes and lines and exits that lead back into a party. So I choose my words carefully. I choose none. He mistakes my quiet for surrender. That is a common mistake. Quiet is a mask I put on when I want to get closer to the truth. He keeps talking. He describes a pitch he gave where he led with a joke, and the room warmed up. He relishes the part about cutting someone off who bored him. He looks over sometimes to see if I'm reacting, like a child glancing back from the edge of the pool to make sure his audience is still there. I am. I've always been. Even when he told me he didn't need me. That's something fathers don't say out loud. How much we stay put so our children can move. The server pours more wine near him. The bottle tips and the stream seems to hang for a second before it breaks. He doesn't notice how close it comes to the cuff of his shirt. He doesn't notice because he thinks he is far away from the consequences tonight. That's the kind of blindness that comes with applause. I look at the label on the bottle and try to remember if I've seen it before. I probably have. We used to celebrate here on weekends when his mother was alive. She liked the lemon tart. She used to say the crust was a lesson in balance. Too soft and it falls apart in your hands. Too hard and you have to stab at it until it surrenders. She liked balance. She used to tell our son that winning with grace is better than winning with noise. He liked that lesson when there were gold stars involved. He forgot it when the stars turned into spotlights. "Don't take it personally," one of the friends says to me with a laugh that means the opposite. "It's just the new world." He says it like a curtain rising. Speed is everything. I don't bother telling him that speed without direction is how you drive into the dark and call it progress. I nod instead, because nodding is the currency of people who are saving their breath for later. He misreads my nod and turns back to my son. They are planning a trip to Milan on a Tuesday, because why not? They're discussing partnerships as if they are shoes that always come in your size. I watch and I listen, and I stack each small disrespect into a neat pile inside my ribcage where it will not burn, but it will not cool either. It will wait. A toast climbs out of the chatter. To growth, someone says. To youth, says another. My son stands to add, to leaving the past behind. It's a good line. The table hums. He turns to me because the performance needs its foil. You taught me to be honest, Dad, so here's honesty. He lifts his glass in my direction like a judge holding a sentence. You should relax now. We've got this. It would be funny if it didn't press on that part of my heart that still thinks he is 10 and shy and asking if I can come to his class on career day. It would be funny if it didn't remind me of how small the bridge is between pride and pity. I put my fingers to the stem of my glass. I don't lift it. I just touch the cool, thin neck and feel its patience. I think about how the word success used to mean a heartbeat to me, not a headline. I think about the first time my son spelled the word wrong on a piece of paper, and I didn't correct him because I liked the crookedness of it. It felt more honest. I think about the way his mother would squeeze my hand under a table when our boy said something sharp, and how the pressure of that squeeze told me not to answer too quickly. I can still feel it, that steady reminder. It travels through years like a light you forgot you left on in the next room. Say something, one of the friends urges, but not kindly, more like a spectator nudging a boxer to lift his gloves so the fight isn't over too fast. I turn my head and look at the kid. He's not a bad kid. None of them are. They're just lit from the outside, and light like that blinds as much as it reveals. I let my mouth soften into something that could be a smile, or a refusal, or a door. Enjoy your meal, I say. It's the closest thing to a blessing I can give without wasting a single word. My son shrugs. He thinks he's won because I didn't play. He returns to his throne of easy laughter and clinking glass, and the table leans toward him as if he is telling them how the ocean works. That's fine. Let them hear a version of the tide. Let them believe the moon pulls it for them. I keep still. I breathe and I wait, and I let the room move around me like a carousel, until the music and the murmur blend into one long thread I can spool around my fingers and keep. I am not angry. I am not impressed. I am not afraid. I am what I have always been when it mattered. Ready. The door at the far end opens for a new wave of late arrivals. Suits. Quiet shoes. The kind of posture you don't buy. I notice the host whisper something, and the servers adjust as if the temperature dropped 1 degree. My son doesn't look up. He's telling a joke about a man who didn't know when to retire. He grins, and the grin is a mask over a face I once kissed goodnight 1,000 times. I study the mask the way a sculptor studies a flaw in the clay, not to break it, but to understand how it formed. I make a promise to myself, simple and clean. I will not raise my voice tonight. I will not lecture or list or threaten. If I speak, it will be in a tone like a straight road. If I act, it will be with the kind of certainty that doesn't need confirmation. But for now, I touch the edge of my napkin and listen to the soft hiss of fabric against fabric. I listen to the tireless heart beating in my chest and the tireless city breathing outside. I listen to my son claim the future like a deed someone gifted him because he smiled the right way at the right hour. I listen and think of a simple truth I learned when the lights were cheap and the nights were long. Success is loud when it is young, and quiet when it is real. I have learned to trust the quiet. I let it gather around me like a shawl his mother would have liked, warm at the shoulders, steady at the neck, ready to be lifted when the next draft comes through. The late arrivals moved like a colder breeze through the room, and the host's smile stretched in that careful way people learn when important shoes are about to cross their floor. My son kept talking, riding his own voice like a wave toward a shoreline he hadn't seen before. We're pushing the deal next week, he told the boy on his left, the boy with the haircut and the easy laugh. They're going to want me in the room, obviously. The CEO's all about young leadership now. The boy nodded as if he had been there when the policy was carved into stone. I reached for my water again and felt the glass sweat against my fingers. A small thing. A real thing. It helped me stay inside my body while the rest of the table floated around in stories they were telling themselves about how the world works when you ask it nicely. The door at the end of the room closed again, and the sound, soft, padded, bounced off my ribs like a reminder knocking once. Stay ready. The server returned to ask if we wanted another plate of antipasti, and my son didn't look up. "We're good," he said, hand slicing the air. "Keep it light. We have people dropping in." He loved the feel of the phrase "people dropping in," the weight of being expected. He turned to me. "Don't worry, Dad," he added, voice coated with that sweet varnish people use when they want to sound kind while pushing you aside. "If the CEO swings by, I'll introduce you. He's very forward-thinking. He appreciates experience." He said experience like it belonged in a museum display beside old keys and a faded map. His friend bit into a crostini and said to the table, crumbs shining on his lip, "It's a new era. The old guard needs to guide from the back." I let the words pass and didn't reach for them. Not everything tossed to you has to be caught. A small light blinked on my phone face down beside my napkin. I didn't turn it over. I already knew what it would say. When people think the world is a set of doors that swing open when they arrive, they forget there are also keys and hinges and the person who chose where the doorway should be cut. I kept my palm on the linen and looked across the table at a spot where the candle flame leaned toward the draft. In that glow, in that soft gold, I saw a memory rise like breath on a winter window. My wife, her hands covered in flour, laughing at the tiny mess she had made on our son's forehead when she dotted him for luck before his first school recital. "Don't wipe it," she told him. "It's your magic." He looked up at her like she had hung the moon. Later that night, I stayed in the office until 2 a.m., folding invoices, chasing payments that had decided to stay asleep. She called me and said, "Come home when the paper stops fighting you." That was her way, soft but firm, the way a hand rests on your shoulder when you are carrying something heavy, so you can remember your own strength. A waiter asked who had ordered the grilled octopus, and the kid with the haircut pointed at himself with 2 fingers, as if claiming a prize without looking at it. My son lifted his glass again. He loved that gesture tonight, and made a small speech about owning the moment. He liked that phrase. It tasted like victory to him. He didn't notice his voice bouncing off a woman at the far end who had stopped listening and was watching the door. He didn't notice because he believed attention was a river that naturally flowed his way. He'd never had to dam it or dredge it or redirect it from a flood that could drown you and the people you love. "Dad," he went on, "you can relax now. This is our lane." I let the corners of my mouth tilt into what could have been agreement. Inside, I counted forks. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's an old trick I use to keep calm. Forks are honest. They only do what they're designed to do. People pretend. I want to tell you about a different table, a smaller one, plastic, scratched, with a leg that always needed a folded napkin to stop the wobble. On that table sat a battered calculator, 3 invoices with coffee stains on the edges, a photograph of a new sign we couldn't afford yet, and a note from my wife that said, "Back by 6. Don't forget Ethan's project." The project was a cardboard model of a bridge. Our son had used too much glue, and the paper warped in the middle. He cried when it collapsed under the weight of a toy car. He told me, "It's because I'm not good at building." I sat him on my lap and said, "It's because bridges need the right foundation. We'll do it again, slower." We did it again, slower. He fell asleep at the table with a smear of glue on his cheek, and my wife draped a shawl over his shoulders. "He wants to leap," she whispered. "Teach him to land." We laughed quietly like people laughing in a library because love felt like something you had to honor with silence sometimes. We got up early. We delivered the new bridge to his class on time. His teacher clapped. He grinned. Later, when the orders came late and the contractor tried to cheat me on materials, I remembered the bridge. I remembered slower. I remembered that leaping looks like progress, but landing is how you live. Back in the restaurant, the wine made small red galaxies against the white of the tablecloth where a drop had fallen. My son flicked his napkin at it with a careless hand and missed. Anyway, he told the nearest set of ears, the CEO loves energy. He wants people who can turn a room. That's me. He tapped his chest like someone knocking on a door to a place he already owned. Old minds can advise, sure, but they don't drive. He said it and looked at me because a line like that needs a witness to sting. I took a sip of water and said, "Drive carefully." The boy on his left giggled, not because I'd said something funny, but because my voice was plain and even, and that made him feel brave. "We're not reckless," my son replied, spinning the stem of his glass. "We're efficient." He liked words that slid. He didn't like words that held. I know what you might be thinking. Why didn't I stand up and tell them the truth? Why didn't I stake my flag in the middle of that white table and say, "You are eating on a surface I paid for, beneath a light I helped hang, in a city that remembers my name when yours goes quiet"? That would have been satisfying. It also would have missed the point. The point was not to shout the roof down. The point was to show him what a roof is made of. My voice, when I use it, is a tool. Tools are for building. The boy on my left asked what I used to do, an innocent question shaped like a needle. "Paperwork," my son answered before I could. He put a friendly hand on my shoulder and squeezed. "He's retired." I looked at his hand. I looked at the blessed, foolish certainty in his squeeze. I lifted my eyes and met his with a level stare. He let go. The door opened again. The host moved across the floor with the pace of someone steering a fragile boat through a crowded harbor. The servers straightened the way people do when a teacher enters. A quietness slipped in, a respectful one. Heads turned, not mine. I watched the candle and the small ways its flame learned the air of the room. Someone at the far end whispered a name. My son heard it. He swallowed his sentence and stood quickly, pushing his chair back with a short scrape that made the tableware tremble. "That's him," he told his friends under his breath, but not low enough to feel private. He told me he might swing by. He adjusted his jacket, smoothed his hair, pinched his cuff as if to remind it to behave. "You're about to see something," he said to the boy with the haircut. The boy nodded, eyes wide like a child waiting for the magician to pull the bird out of the sleeve he never checked for openings. Before that river reached our table, another memory surfaced. The first time I met the man they were about to stand for, he wasn't a CEO. He was a clever graduate with questions that walked faster than his shoes. He knocked on the door of a rented office that smelled like old carpet and fresh paint, and asked if I had 5 minutes. I gave him 40. He had a mind like clean wind. He loved numbers, but cared more about people. "I like how you talk about customers," he said. "You sound like you know them by name." I did. I could list the ones who paid on time, the ones who needed an extra week, the ones who brought coffee when they came to sign because they knew the day was heavy. He joined us a month later. He stayed late. He listened to the quiet, the way you listen to someone you love breathing in the next room. He moved up because he moved right. Years later, when I gave him the keys in front of a crowd that liked the word succession more than it liked the word foundation, he hugged me with both arms and whispered, "I won't forget." He never did. He learned when to speak and when to let the work speak. Now the work walked toward us in a well-cut suit. My son's grin widened. His friends stood at half height, and then lifted the rest of the way when they saw other people rising, because that's how respect travels in rooms like this, by echo. "Sir," my son called, stepping out from his chair to make himself visible in the path. "Over here!" He waved once, a smooth slice of the air, the gesture of a man calling to a waiter and a king at the same time. The man's eyes moved around the room, warm but sharp, and he nodded at a few faces as he came closer. He carries his respect like water in steady hands. It doesn't slosh. He reached our end of the table, and my son spoke first. "Good to see you," he said front-footed, offering the practiced handshake. "We were just talking strategy." The man took his hand with a polite clasp and a small smile that didn't overstay. "Good to hear," he replied, and his voice was low, even, the kind that knows microphones and whispers both. My son introduced his friends with hurried charisma, as if time itself were a stage manager pushing him along. He saved me for last. "This is my father," he said, and the pause after father was not reverence but a comma tossed like a coin. "He's, retired now. He likes to see how things are evolving." He said evolving like we were all butterflies here, wings still wet. The man turned to me, and there was that flicker I had expected, the small brightness that passes between two people who have carried the same heavy box down a long flight of stairs without dropping it. He reached out his hand. "Always good to see you," he said. He meant it. He always had. I took his hand, and in the second our palms met, I felt 20 years roll through the grip like a film reel. Long nights, nearly empty accounts, a truck that broke down on the ring road the day the city flooded, a late-night phone call about a supplier who tried to swap materials, a list of employees we kept through a winter that cut to the bone, because losing them would have meant losing our reason for the whole machine. My son watched our handshake the way a tourist watches locals embrace, curious, a little impatient, certain it will be over soon so the tour can continue. He started to speak again, already pointing his words at the future he was sure he had invited. "We've got a pitch ready for next week," he said. "I think you'll be impressed. We're bringing new energy." The man's eyes moved back to me and then to the table. He read the room the way a pilot reads a sky. "New energy is good," he said softly. "Old energy keeps the lights on." My son laughed as if that were a joke. "Exactly," he agreed too quickly. "That's what I tell him." He jerked his head toward me, still smiling at the man, as if to say we had an inside joke now. The man's smile didn't change. He has learned not to let his mouth speak on behalf of his thoughts. He nodded. He placed a hand on my shoulder, the way a man places a hand on the hood of a car he trusts. "How are you?" he asked. "Hungry," I answered, and that made his eyes warm the way a window warms when the morning gets serious. He looked around the table again, and I watched the subtle shift in posture among the young. They were arranging themselves in hopes of a glance, a line, a link. He gave them what they were due, a polite paragraph of attention. My son tried to steer the words toward himself with the light pressure of a man guiding a dance partner he hasn't learned how to hear yet. "We've been talking about speed," he offered. "The market's moving." The man nodded. "It always is." He was kind enough not to say that speed is what markets are, not what makes them. He shook a few more hands. He thanked the server by name and asked if she had eaten. She blinked, surprised, the same way she had when I thanked her earlier. Respect echoes too, if you know where to stand. My son cleared his throat, a small announcement, and said, "We should grab time next week to walk you through our plan." He had already positioned himself for the picture in his head, standing beside the man, equal lighting, equal laughs. "Of course," the man said. "I'm giving a few remarks tonight. Stay after." My son's chest grew an inch. He nodded fast. "We will." Then, to me, in a stage whisper that only half whispered, "Try not to argue with him, okay? He hates getting dragged into old stories." The man heard it. He didn't flinch. I didn't look at my son. I looked at the glass of water again, at the clean rim, at the way a single bead slid down and traced the line it had chosen until it met the table and vanished. When the man moved on to greet the other end of the table, laughter chased him like birds lifting from a wire after a truck passes. My son exhaled as if he had just completed a sprint. "You see," he said brightly to his friends, to anyone who would nod at him. "He gets it." He sat back down, riding the glow of proximity, and began to outline a call agenda for a conversation that hadn't been scheduled yet. He leaned toward me as if generous. "You can join if you want," he said, "just to listen." He meant it as mercy. He meant it as shelter. I let the offer hang in the air like a coat on a chair that no one will wear. I heard the clink of cutlery against plates as the next course arrived, the hush of napkins being lifted, the breath of the room adjusting to the new aroma. I heard my wife's voice, not in the past, but right then, as if it had traveled down a bright corridor and stepped in beside me. "Teach him to land," she had said. I had tried. Perhaps I had taught him how to leap too well. Perhaps the world had taught him that applause is proof. Perhaps the proof would have to come in a different shape, one that doesn't care about clinking glasses or practiced smiles. I felt the calm settle again. That cold, clear calm that is not anger, but something colder, a patience sharp enough to cut. "Dad," my son said, catching the edge of my silence with a hook of curiosity, "you're very quiet tonight." He meant to tease. He meant to win the round the way you win a point in a game you invented. I looked at him and said, "Listening." He rolled his eyes again, less theatrically this time, more like a habit that had grown comfortable. "Listening is fine," he said. "Action matters." He tapped the table as if hitting a button. "We move fast. That's success now." I let the idea sit between us like a coin neither of us picked up. "Fast is easy," I said at last. "Straight is harder." He frowned because the sentence didn't give him something to swing at. He likes fights where he knows where to land his punches. He doesn't like places where words turn corners and keep going after they pass you. He reached for his glass and knocked it slightly with his knuckle, and a thin ring of wine slid up and kissed the rim before setting back down. I watched his hand, steady but not steady enough, and I thought about how hands learn what heads don't. I thought about the bridges we built on cardboard and on concrete, about the corridors our minds walk when pride closes doors and quiet opens windows. I did not plan to teach a lesson tonight. I did not plan to balance any ledgers in front of an audience. The world, however, loves timing as much as it loves truth. And the two were walking down the hall together now, arm in arm, toward a microphone I could see at the far side of the room. My son saw it too. He sat straighter. He smiled at his reflection in a spoon, a child's check in a man's hand. "Don't embarrass me," he said under his breath, eyes still on the mirrored shine. It was a strange sentence, small and sharp, flung without thought. I turned to him, and something in my face, something plain, something steady, made him look back. For a second, I saw the boy who cried over a collapsed bridge, the boy whose fingers were sticky with glue and hope, the boy who loved applause but loved my nod more. "I won't," I said. He blinked because the tone was not a promise, but a decision. He opened his mouth to ask something he wouldn't have known how to shape. He closed it again, because the host tapped a glass with a spoon, and the sound traveled through the room like a straight line. People turned. The man at the far side stepped onto a small lift of floor where a microphone waited. The room, grateful for the excuse, fell into quiet. My son's hand went to his tie. He tightened it. He smiled. He did not see his own reflection pale in the back of a spoon. He did not look down long enough to notice his hands beginning to tremble. The spoon against the glass sent a clean note through the room, a single bright line that cut the chatter neatly and left it in pieces on the cloth. Chairs shifted, napkins paused. You could feel people leaning into the silence as if it were a doorway. The man crossed to the microphone with the easy pace of someone who already knew what he needed to say and had no interest in performing confidence for anyone. He adjusted the stand a touch lower, thanked the host without taking the microphone out of its clip, and let his gaze settle the room. One table at a time, one face at a time, the way a careful hand smooths a wrinkle out of a sheet. My son inhaled like a sprinter on the blocks. His friends straightened their jackets, cleared their throats, and gave their smiles a quick polish with their tongues. I felt the quiet inside my chest widen, like a hallway with the lights turning on one by one. "Good evening," he said, and the sound reached every corner without effort. "I won't keep you long. I just want to talk about two words that get thrown around a lot: success and momentum." A small ripple of approval, the kind people offer when a speech starts on a familiar road. My son's hands framed the air in front of him, as if cupping the words. He glanced sideways at me with a small glow. "Watch this." I watched. The man continued. "People think momentum is speed. It isn't. Speed is how fast you move. Momentum is mass in motion. It's what you carry that keeps you going. And success, in my experience, is not noise. It's the sound your work makes when you stop talking." A few chuckles, a few nods from people who had learned their lessons the hard way and recognized the shape of them. He glanced toward the servers and said, "Thank you for taking care of everyone tonight." The woman who'd brought me water earlier blinked at the ground and smiled into her collar. He spoke again, no rush in it. "We like to think we're modern. We are. We like to think we're fast. We have to be. But the truth is, we are standing on something. We are eating because people built a table. We are working because someone turned on lights and kept them on through nights when that wasn't easy." He let that rest. Somewhere behind me, a chair leg clicked softly against tile. My son's jaw tipped higher, as if he were already in the part of the story where he walks on stage to accept something that proves everything he has said about himself. The man went on. "When I started here, I was given something better than a title. I was given a chance by someone who didn't ask for credit, didn't chase the spotlight, and didn't let me mistake speed for direction. He taught me to listen first, to call customers by their names, and to carry the weight without talking about the weight. I learned more from his silence than I've learned from 100 panels about innovation." My son's smile sharpened. He nodded too soon, counting himself into a song he hadn't heard before. He lifted his glass a fraction from the table, hunting for the moment to rise. His friends leaned forward, eyes bright, like people watching a trick they already know the secret to. "And," the man said, looking at our table in a way that made the air thicken, "he is here tonight." A wave moved through the room. Heads turned in small automatic arcs. It is strange how quickly attention can change hands. "He won't like this part," the man added, and there was a soft, affectionate laugh. "But I will do it anyway." He faced me now, and I felt the old warmth of recognition, not public, not staged, just a simple current that runs between two people who've moved a heavy desk across a narrow doorway together and still laugh about the scrape on the wall. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in recognizing the founder of this company, the man who built the table we're sitting at. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Him. He didn't point with a long, dramatic arm. He didn't call for a spotlight. He just turned his left hand, palm open, toward where I sat. I could hear all the small sounds at once. Silverware stopping, breath catching, glass stems ticking against plates as people set them down carelessly. The table tilted. Not literally, but in the way attention has weight. The boy with the precise haircut looked from me to my son as if a stage manager had missed a cue. My son didn't stand, not yet. He froze mid-breath, mid-smile, and in that tiny pause the world reintroduced itself to him. The wine in his glass rang a soft circle against crystal, and a line of red climbed the inside of the bowl like a tide and slid back down. His hand trembled. Not a lot. Just enough that the reflection of the chandelier in his drink turned into a scatter of small broken stars. I did not rush to stand. I don't know how to rush to stand. When a man I respect asks me to accept respect, I did not build for this moment. I set my napkin on the table carefully, the way my wife used to fold a shawl over the back of a chair. I placed my palm flat on the cloth for a heartbeat, to feel how steady things still were, and then I rose. The sound that came was not loud. Loud has a place. This wasn't it. What came was thick, all around, the kind of applause that has memory in it. Old hands that remember pushing, young hands that are learning how to make calluses, voices that know what it is to be fed by a paycheck you can trust. I felt it in my ribs the way you feel a train under your feet before you hear it. The server with kind eyes smiled straight at me. The host nodded once, serious, as if we were signing something invisible he had witnessed. My son clapped 2 quick times, the kind of clap you give when a plane lands and you didn't really think it wouldn't. He caught himself and pushed into a longer rhythm, too fast, then too slow, like he could not find the right speed for this sound. He half stood and then did not. He sat back and then stood again because the room shifted around him and he wanted to be where it was. His friends clapped with expressions you might wear at a funeral for a person you had bragged about not liking. I looked at my son and saw not the man he had been trying to sculpt in mirrors, but the boy who had once balanced a toy car on cardboard and held his breath waiting for gravity. I gave him a small nod. He did not know what to do with it. The man at the microphone stepped down and reached me through the circle of faces that opened without asking. He took my hand and didn't shake it in the public way. He squeezed it in the private way that says, "I remember all of it. Someone at." The far end said my first name and then said sir afterward, and that made me want to sit back down because I don't like the distance that sir puts between people who work. The man spoke so only I could hear. "You could have told me not to," he said. "I wouldn't have listened." I smiled. "You never did," I answered. "That's why you kept going." He laughed under his breath and then turned, facing the room again with me beside him. He lifted his hand and the applause settled into a softer shape. "Would you say a few words?" he asked. I do not enjoy microphones. They make the whole world feel like a tiled room, where your voice echoes back at you in a language you almost recognize. But I have learned not to refuse the moments that teach, if I can help it. I took the small step to the low platform and felt the boards under my shoes, the honest vibration of wood that has been walked across by 1,000 quiet feet. I did not take the microphone out of the clip. "Thank you," I said, and the word landed where it needed to. "I won't speak long. Food tastes worse when speeches run too hot." There were a few smiles, relief loosening shoulders around the room. When we started, this wasn't a company. It was a room with bad light, a loan we were slightly ashamed of, and a calendar with too many squares we didn't know how to fill. We didn't talk about speed. We talked about making sure the lights stayed on. We made promises and then worked to be the kind of people who could keep them. I looked at the staff, because you always look at the staff. I'm proud of the people who built this with their hands, not just with their mouths. I'm proud of the people who stayed when staying didn't look clever, and I'm proud of the people who came later and decided to carry it forward without dropping the corners. I let my eyes pass over my son briefly. We confuse success with attention sometimes. Attention is a flare. It burns bright and then you can't see for a while. Success is a lamp you keep lit so others can find their way home. A quiet, a clean one. "Keep the lamps lit," I said. "Don't mistake the flare for the work." I didn't say more. I stepped down and the man took my arm lightly, like a son would if he had learned to use the word without fear. We moved back to our table through a path that made itself. The room recovered its pulse. The servers reminded people that food still wanted to be eaten. The breath of hot plates rose and folded into the smell of wine and citrus. My son stood awkwardly and then gave me a quick hug that ended before it began. "You didn't tell me you were going to say anything," he whispered, throat tight in a way that made the words dry. "I didn't know I needed your permission," I said, not unkindly, and the sentence seemed to surprise him more than any punishing speech would have. "Founder," the boy with the haircut said to me, as if testing a new word, as if tasting a fruit he had only ever seen sliced. "That's impressive." I nodded because I have never known what to do with that sort of sentence. My son's smile tried to grow again and found it could not. He cleared his throat and aimed his voice at the man who was now speaking with the host. "We're excited to show you the plan," he said loudly enough to be heard. The man looked over his shoulder and, with a warmth that did not overheat, said, "We'll make time." Then to me, more quietly, 10 minutes after dessert?" I nodded. My son heard dessert and 10 minutes and translated these into the promise the world had made him since he learned how to be charming. "It will be yours if you keep smiling." He did not translate the glance, the weight, the history. Those are languages you learn with your hands. The table tried to return to its previous shape, but shapes don't like to be put back once you've folded them into something new. People asked small questions. People told small stories about early days they had not been alive for. I listened and gave them what I could. The server refreshed water. "Thank you," she said, as if I had given her something more than courtesy. "No," I told her. "Thank you." My son sat very still, which is not his nature. He ran a finger along the knife blade, not touching the edge, just the flat, as if checking whether something was true about its shine. "You could have told me," he said again, softer now, as if the words were a sheet he could lay over the parts of himself he didn't want others to see. "I did," I said. "For years." He looked at me, puzzled. "Not with words," I added. "With work." He didn't like that answer, but he didn't know how to fight it without swinging at the air. At the far side of the room, the man returned to the microphone for his closing. "One more thing," he said. My son straightened so suddenly his chair tipped a centimeter and came back. "Next quarter," the man announced, "we're formalizing a mentorship council. People who have built will sit with those who want to build. Not to slow them down, but to keep them from running in circles. We're calling it the bridge table." His eyes flicked to me, and something old and private passed through them, like a small boat across a familiar lake. "Because bridges don't happen by accident," he said, and I felt my wife's hand touch my shoulder from a place beyond the reach of air. I saw cardboard, glue, a toy car, a boy asleep with hope drying on his cheek. "We'll share more soon," he concluded. "For tonight, eat, talk, and if you're lucky enough to be at the same table as someone who kept the lights on before you got here, thank them before you leave." He stepped away and the notes of conversation rose again, newly tuned. My son swallowed. "The bridge table," he repeated, rolling the phrase in his mouth like he was trying to decide if it tasted like a gift or a test. "That's great," he told his friends brightly. "That's inclusive. I've been saying we need to integrate legacy voices." He liked legacy now. It had become a word you could wear without feeling heavy. He turned to me quickly. "You should join. I can put your name forward." There was no malice in it. There was only the reflex of someone who has learned that value flows from him outward. "I suspect he knows my name," I said. The boy with the haircut smirked, and then the smirk fell off his face like a sticker that had lost its glue. Plates arrived, silver domes lifted. The room shifted back into being a restaurant and not a theater. People chewed and drank and pretended they didn't watch our table out of the sides of their eyes. My son tried a joke, and it missed. He tried another, and it sank faster. The weight of the reveal hadn't crushed him. It had simply reminded him where the floor was. He didn't like the floor. He liked air. He took a sip of wine with a hand that wanted to be steady and found it wasn't finished trembling. He set the glass down carefully, aligning the base with a crease in the cloth as if precision could fix what pride had loosened. "You could have told me," he said a third time, because sometimes we repeat a sentence hoping that on the third try it becomes true. I looked at him long enough for him to feel seen and said, "You weren't listening." The boy on his left leaned toward him. "It's good, you know," he offered like a bandage. Your dad being the founder, that's power. My son nodded too quickly, already trying to bend the fact into a shape that could fit his older plans. Of course, he said. We're a team. He looked at me, searching my face for a line he could borrow, a bridge he could cross without getting wet. We are, I said, but teams play better when they know who built the field. He flinched, not visibly, not to anyone else, but I felt the small recoil, the muscle under the sentence trying to hold itself still. The man touched my elbow then. 10 minutes? He asked. We can step into the side room. My son nearly jumped to his feet. I'll come, he said, rushing the words out with the hunger of someone who hears a gate opening. Absolutely, the man replied, polite but not committing. I wanted a word with him first. He tipped his head toward me. My son stopped mid-air and set his hand back on the table as if putting down a tool he had misused. Sure, he said, and the word clicked dryly against his teeth. I'll be right here. The man and I moved away. I felt my son stare on the back of my jacket like sunlight that had lost its warmth. In the side room, the lights were softer, a little warmer, and the noise from the dining area came through as a comfortable hum. The man didn't waste time. He never has. He's talented, he said, the way you describe a fast river. Yes, I agreed. He hasn't learned to listen yet, he added. No, I said, but you can't learn to listen until you run out of things to say. He smiled. He might be getting close, he said. We stood for a moment in that easy quiet that only exists between people who have done hard things together without needing to narrate them. We're tightening approvals on the deal, he told me. Too much show, not enough structure. He thinks being in the room is the same as owning the room. I nodded. He'll hate that, I said. He will, the man agreed. And then he'll get better, or he won't. He looked at me, not quite a question in his eyes, but something adjacent. You still have the veto? He asked softly, using a word you only use when you know the document it lives in. I tapped my jacket pocket once. Paper is light until it's not. He nodded. I won't ask you to use it, he said. I don't need to. I thought of my wife's shawl, the feel of glue on a child's cheek, the rhythm of the words slower. Maybe I won't have to, I said. Maybe he'll land on his own. The man's mouth tilted, not quite a smile, not quite a grim line. Teach him to land, he repeated, as if trying the phrase on for fit. That's the plan, I said. We went back out together, not because we needed to make an entrance, but because we had never learned how to leave one another alone to carry the heavy end. We walked back to the table with the simple rhythm of men who know how to carry something heavy without making a show of it. My son stood as we approached, a little too fast, knocking his knee against the chair. The sound was small, but it felt loud to him. He forced a grin for the man, and then for me, and his friends gave him those eager looks people reserve for someone they believe is about to collect a prize. Dessert plates were landing like white moons, lemon tart, a chocolate dome that cracked with a spoon, berries shining under sugar. The room had returned to its soft noise, but at our table the noise had thinned. The man glanced at the clock above the bar and then at my son. Join us in the side room in 10, he said. Let us start a thought. You can help finish it. My son nodded hard, as if nodding could move time closer. He didn't sit, not fully. He hovered on the edge of the chair, the way a runner hovers at a starting line, body already leaning into a future he thinks is ready for him. I tasted the lemon tart because some memories deserve witnesses. My wife always used to claim the first forkful from my plate like a thief who knew she would be forgiven. I could almost hear her soft laugh in the sugar crackle. I let the calm rise again, the steady kind, the kind that makes a tune out of footfalls and breathing. My son checked his watch and checked the door and checked his reflection in the back of a spoon, and when the 10 minutes had finally paid their bill, he was the first to the side room. Inside, the hum of the dining area softened into a comfortable hush. The side room had glass on 2 walls, a long table of dark wood, and a single carafe of water that waited like a polite guest. The man took the seat at the far end, but didn't claim head of table energy. He only set down a notebook and a pen and looked at me in that way he does when he is making a shape in his head and wants to be sure the corners will meet. My son chose a chair halfway down, then changed his mind and sat closer to the end, then closer still, until he was nearly beside the man. He folded his hands, then unfolded them, then held his glass by the stem and found his fingers were not done, trembling. He put the glass down gently and pretended it had been a choice. "I brought a deck," he said brightly, tapping his phone. "Tight, high level, actionable." He loved words that stacked. "Before decks," the man said quietly, "a small correction." My son leaned forward, eager to be corrected in a manageable way. "We're tightening approvals on the deal," the man continued. "There's heat, but not enough steel. It will not move next week." My son blinked like someone who had expected a door to open and found a wall in its place. "We can fix it fast," he said, and the fast hung in the room like a glove with no hand inside. "We'll take it slow," the man answered. "We'll take it straight." He looked at me, then back at my son. "And we'll rethink who's in the room." There it was, the first clean crack through the mask. My son swallowed and tried to make a plan of it. "Happy to lead with you in the room," he offered. "Happy to—" He searched for a word that meant stay important. "Anchor it." The man didn't look away. "You won't lead this one," he said, flat as a level placed on a board. The sentence didn't need anger to stand. It had gravity. My son's face did a small thing then, a tightening around the eyes that reminded me of when he was 9 and a teacher had told him to read slower, and he hated the idea of not being the fastest thing in the room. He breathed in, held it, let it out. "May I ask why?" he managed. The man nodded. "Because the room doesn't need performance. It needs weight. Tonight you chased attention when you should have been collecting details. You didn't listen." He lifted his pen and set it down again. "Your father listens." My son looked at me, not for rescue, but the way a swimmer looks back toward the shore and is surprised by how far the water has pulled him. He wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't harden. He turned the ring on his finger once, twice, a slow orbit. "I can adjust," he said quietly. "You will," I said, because I wanted the sentence to land like a floor, not like a blow. I slid my wallet out and set a thin envelope on the table. It was the color of something that has waited a long time to become necessary. He stared at it, puzzled. The man's eyes flicked to me and then to the envelope. He knew that color. He had signed its twin once upon a time. I didn't push it across the table with ceremony. I just nudged it with 2 fingers so that it rested in the clear space between us. "I never wanted to use this," I said, my voice level, "because paperwork is a last resort when people can hear each other." I tapped the edge. "It's the clause your mother called the seatbelt. If someone tries to drive the car too fast toward a cliff, the belt tightens." My son's mouth parted. He didn't reach for the paper. "A veto?" he whispered, the syllables sticking. "A golden share?" The man didn't save him from the thought. He let it walk all the way to its own edge. "A seatbelt," I said again, because I preferred what it did over what it was called. "I wrote it to protect the people who work under our roof. I wrote it to protect you. If we can correct course without it, we will. If we can't, it tightens." He looked smaller in his chair, not because I had made him small, but because the room had returned to its true size and the spotlight had stopped cheating the measurements. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, and there was no performance in his voice this time. Only the ache of a boy who has just discovered the ground under his feet goes deeper than he thought. "Because I wanted you to learn to hear no before it came from paper," I said. "Because I hoped you would hear it from wisdom, or from the quiet shape of the room, or from the way a server's eyes looked when you cut across her sentence. Paper is ugly when respect fails." He flinched a little, not because I had said it cruelly, but because truth brushes the skin like a winter wind. The man rested his elbows lightly on the wood. "Here is what I propose," he said, and his sentences came like clean planks laid one after another. "The deal goes back to pre-brief. We rebuild the structure. We bring the bridge table into the early review, not as a formality, but as a guardrail. You," he nodded at my son, "shadow the process and own 3 unglamorous pillars: vendor compliance, customer interviews, and internal billing tests. No headlines, no panels, only work." My son's jaw flexed. Pride wanted to run. Sense told it to walk. "For how long?" he asked. "Long enough to learn to land," the man replied. He looked at me. "We'll meet every other week," he added. "And if the seatbelt has to tighten, it will." I didn't nod. I didn't need to. The decision didn't require victory music. It required follow-through. My son stared at the envelope again. "So, that's it?" he said, soft but sharp. "My big moment? Gone?" He wasn't asking for pity. He was taking inventory. Not gone, I said. Moved, he blinked. Moved where? From the room that applauds, I said, to the room that builds. He made a sound that could have been a laugh but wasn't. That's not what I dreamed. I could have told him the title of the night in that sentence. His dreams shattered. But I didn't need to rub the word against his skin. Dreams change shape when they meet weight, I said. The ones worth keeping learn to carry it. He finally reached for the envelope. He didn't open it. He just rested his fingertips on the edge like a man learning to test the temperature of water. His hands trembled again, not from fear alone, but from the exhaustion of being angry at an idea that wouldn't go away. He looked up, eyes bright and raw. "Did Mom know?" he asked. I smiled before I could stop myself. "She insisted," I said. "She called it the 'don't let our boy mistake spotlights for sunlight' clause." The man exhaled a laugh through his nose. My son closed his eyes and breathed in once like someone catching the smell of bread they forgot they loved. When he opened them, some of the shine had bled off his pride and left a better light. "Okay," he said, and the word clicked into the room like a key that had always been on the ring. Vendor compliance, customer interviews, billing tests. He tried the weight of each task and found it held. "I'll do it," he swallowed. "I'll do it well." He looked at me then, really looked, the way a son looks when he remembers that the person in front of him once held his bicycle seat and ran beside him until he didn't need the hand anymore. "But I was rude," he said, the sentence catching on a thorn inside his throat. "At dinner. He was giving me bricks. He didn't know how to lay them yet." "Yes," I said. "You will apologize. Not to me, to her." I nodded toward the door where the server's silhouette crossed now and then, like a shadow on a curtain. He flinched again, then nodded. "I will." We walked out together, not as a parade, but side by side. The dining room absorbed us. The server with kind eyes approached to refill water and paused when she saw us coming. My son met her gaze and couldn't hold it for more than a second. Humility is bright. You have to squint until your eyes adjust. "I'm sorry," he said quietly without the smile he usually wore like armor. "I was rude earlier. Thank you for taking care of us." She stared, surprised, then smiled a small smile that meant the apology had landed in the right place. "Thank you," she said back, and poured water into his glass with a steadier hand than his had been all night. At our table, his friends had drifted into safer discussions, the kind where nobody can be wrong because nobody says anything. They looked up when we returned. The boy with the haircut tried to read the outcome on our faces and failed. "All good?" he asked with the cheer of a person who wants the conversation to move away from the edge. "Better than that," I said, and I meant it. My son sat and this time he went all the way down into the chair. He took a breath. He didn't reach for a glass. He reached for a fork and tasted the lemon tart like it was new. "It's good," he told no one in particular. "It's balanced." I felt my wife's hand on my shoulder again, the shawl of it, the warmth. The man came by once more to say goodnight to the table. "We'll connect tomorrow," he told my son. "Clear your morning?" "Yes, sir," my son said, and the sir was not a performance. It was respect learning to stand. The man squeezed my shoulder lightly and left. The room shifted back into its ordinary beauty, the candlelight, the low talk, the small clinks that mean people are sharing something they'll remember later. My son leaned toward me, not for a secret, not for permission, just to be closer to the person who understood the shape of the evening. "I meant what I said," he murmured. "I'll do it well." I nodded. "I know." He studied the tablecloth. "You could have embarrassed me," he said. "I didn't need to," I answered. "The truth already did the work." He swallowed. "When you stood and they clapped," he shook his head, a small, helpless gesture. "My hands wouldn't stop." He looked at them now, spread on the cloth like two separate lives waiting to be claimed. "They'll learn," I said. "Hands remember what we asked them to carry." He half smiled. "Teach me to land?" It wasn't a question. It was a request. "Tomorrow," I said. 7 a.m. warehouse, no jackets. We'll start with the billing tests. He grimaced like a child tasting medicine and then nodded. "Okay." He was quiet for a while, a real quiet, the kind that makes space for something to grow. "Dad," he said at last. "Yes?" "Thanks for the seatbelt." I touched the envelope. It's ugly, I said, but it saves faces. We settled the bill with a tip that made the server blink again, and we stood. At the door, the city leaned in, its night wind, its neon, the smell of rain that hadn't decided yet. My son moved to the curb and then paused. He turned back, looking at the room that had been a theater for him, and had turned back into a simple place to eat. He looked at me. "I'll fix it," he said, and in that sentence I heard his mother's laugh, his 9-year-old stubbornness, the clack of a calculator in a small office with bad light. The first time he rode a bicycle without my hand. "Good," I said, "and I'll hold you to it." He nodded once and then again, as if the second nod were a promise to himself. On the ride home, the city slid past in straight lines. He didn't check his phone. He looked out the window and counted the lights the way a child counts stars. At a red light, he spoke softly. "What was the line you said at the microphone?" he asked. "About lamps." "Keep the lamps lit," I said. "Don't mistake the flare for the work." He repeated it, lighter, as if trying it on. "Keep the lamps lit." He smiled without showing his teeth. "I like that." I thought of cardboard bridges and glue and slow hands. I thought of my wife's flower on a small forehead. I thought of the word success walking down a hallway and deciding to sit instead of run. "Me too," I said. When we reached home, he didn't walk out first. He waited for me, and we crossed the threshold together. In the hallway, the picture of his mother caught the light. He stopped and looked at it for a long time, then touched the frame with a fingertip, like he was afraid of waking her. "I miss her," he said. "Me too," I said. He breathed in. "I'll make her proud." "Do the work," I said. "The feeling will follow." He nodded. He went to his room. I went to the kitchen and turned off the last lamp. Then I turned it back on. "Keep the lamps lit. If you felt this, tell me where you're reading from." Drop your city, your story, your favorite line. Like this if it hit you, share it with someone who needs a reminder. Leave a comment with the moment that grabbed you, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.